His name is Brian Lewis. He's the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee and the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. He is currently the Secretary General of CAP and Chair of SIGA Group Community. His presentation is entitled Sports, Diplomacy, Social Justice, and Human Rights. Prior to his election to the presidency of TTOC, Brian served on several committees, including marketing and finance, and accepted a challenge to secure sponsorship opportunities. A strong advocate for inclusion, diversity, and gender equality, the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Community launched the Future is Female program under his leadership. The Future is Female program champions and advocates for gender equity and equality and an end to all forms of discrimination at all levels of Olympic and Commonwealth sport. Recently, he received international recognition for his fearless and relentless advocacy for the rescinding of Olympic ban imposed by the International Olympic Committee on two Afro-American athletes, Vince Matthews and Wayne Collette. Brian holds an executive master's degree in sports organization management and has established an international leadership reputation. He is highly sought after as an innovative, insightful, thought leader and speaker. And now welcome Brian to the floor.
Good morning. For those of you this morning, and those of you good evening, and good night, depending on where you are. So thank you very much for that introduction. And so let's roll, because I know that there's a saying, at least here in Trinidad and Tobago, when you're having fun time, just flies. So 15 minutes, 20 minutes will fly very fast. So let's roll. The human brain, no matter where in the world it comes from, what race, ethnicity, color, gender, human brain is afraid of, pull up this slide with a picture, please. Thanks. Yeah, the human brain is afraid of war, confusion, and feeling safe. Feeling unsafe, sorry. The brain's priority is to help each of us survive and thrive, live a better life, find purpose and meaning, to be accepted, and to find friendship, and to have peace of mind. Transformation is the core desire for every human being. Sport is one of the most powerful forces for good, and sport helps human beings survive and thrive. The Olympic values of excellence, friendship, and respect are what guides global Olympic movement. And we'll all see over the years the use of the Olympic Games for good, for bad, and indifferent. Issues of sport washing are thrown out. We have seen whether it refers to the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, the Tokyo Olympic Games, even way back to 1936, the Olympic Games in Germany. What we have seen over the years is that sport has been used. One of the earlier speakers referenced Qatar, and we have seen accusations made against Qatar in terms of what they call sport washing. So there are many examples. Recently, as I was introduced, reference was made to the advocacy to rescind the life ban of the Afro-American athletes, Vince Matthews and Wayne Coleman, who were banned for life by the International Olympic Committee for taking protest action and expressing their human rights, freedom of expression in 1972 to protest silently and non-threateningly about the way racism and the way Black Americans were treated, especially at that time. So that while they may not have given it an official title, sport diplomacy, sport has been used. Nelson Mandela, Madiba, famously used the power of sport in 1995. At that point in time, the Springbok rugby team was seen as the symbol of apartheid and white supremacy. And the great and the iconic Nelson Mandela would have donned the Springbok jersey, presented the trophy and stood next to the then Springbok captain. An action that may have met with some concern around the world and most certainly in South Africa. But the great Nelson Mandela believed in the power of sport as a universal language to unite people. That is one of the most iconic symbols of sport diplomacy. Next slide, please. How, in the context of transformation, sport can improve lives, make a positive difference, and by doing so, contribute to creating a safer, fairer, fitter, and more just, inclusive, and better world. However you may translate it, it all forms the same objective outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda, 17 goals, which I know many of you have researched and know some of you by heart. But the challenge is, given the traditional approach towards diplomacy, there is a whole lot of discussion, which is really the subject of a whole different talk, about whether sport and diplomacy is a good fit, whether sport can really serve diplomacy. But that's the traditional approach, because in the traditional approach towards diplomacy, diplomacy is seen as government. It's seen as a foreign policy. But what doesn't change is that the three objectives of diplomacy at its core relates to communication, negotiation, and representation. And in that regard, sport has proven over time an invaluable tool that bridges communities, countries, and nations. Sport has been used, for example, in 2018, create a conversation between 2018 to hold the game, to create a conversation between North and South Korea. Sport was used powerfully years ago when South Africa was banned from the Olympics and made a barrier in terms of world sport to assist in the breaking down of apartheid. But you may well ask, how can sport transform communities, societies, and countries? One human being at a time. Sport is taken for granted. And you may not recall that all children love to play and have fun, laugh, and be happy. Adults and young people too. And it is in that play, that sense of play, that sport, especially at the grassroots level, sport diplomacy can be used in a powerful way. You see, part of the challenge is that there is so much focus on professional sport, elite level sport, the sport industry, which is billions of dollars, major events such as the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup, to name an example, that people forget that it is at the level of the community and the grassroots that if we are to overcome the risk that the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda is facing, given the crisis of climate change crisis, the crisis of the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, the COVID-19 pandemic that has created a regressive environment that has set back the advantage that have been made in terms of bridging the economic and wealth inequalities. And it is really, I put forward to you that sport diplomacy can make a powerful difference, not so much at the big level, but it is at the grassroots and community level. And that is where each of us, who all love to play, whether we are children, adults, young people, whether we, whatever gender, is able, differently able, whether our ethnicity, black, brown, whatever, we all love to play. We all love to be happy. We all love to have fun. And in so doing, we can use the power of sport to make a powerful difference and help keep the Sustainable Development 2030 agenda on track. The role of diplomacy in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda, sport diplomacy, social justice, and human rights. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. So just a quick point and a reminder. Diplomacy and the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 may not be a front burner and front of mind topic for many political, academic, sport, policy leaders, and decision makers, and influencers, and opinion shapers. Because as I was saying earlier, traditionally, diplomacy is seen to be the purview of nation states, and governments deal with diplomacy. But, next slide, please. The reality is, even in the space of sport diplomacy, it is the global north, if I may say, that has embraced the reality of sport and sport diplomacy as a strategic imperative. You can post this talk and today's session, go and research online, where you see Australia, for example, have a dedicated sport diplomacy strategy. Qatar, as one of my colleagues, presenters would have said, highlighted, they have definitely. Saudi Arabia, the United States of America. But in the global south, we don't embrace sports. Of course, there are economic and human resource priorities in global sport, in the global south, that may take precedent over sport. But it is important for me to highlight that regardless of what side of the coin you fall, global sport diplomacy is being used, and it is now being formalized in an actual strategy. So just quickly, I just wanted to make this point. So the connection between sport and diplomacy isn't always clear. I mentioned that a bit earlier on. You know, some people debate, what is sport diplomacy? Is it a means or an end? Is it an element of public diplomacy? Is sport credible in the cloistered elitist realm of diplomacy? And it is not that sport is a cure-all or a quick fix, because the reality is that there are deeper institutional, systemic, and structural issues around racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, colorism, classism, colonialism, neocolonialism, and other isms. And the paradox of sport. And that point, I wanted to briefly mention it. When I say the paradox of sport, it has to do with, while sport is all of these nice things, it is a fact of life that sport causes issues related to nationalism. Sport is still in the main white patriarchy, so that there are issues that arise from that. Sport is still, in the terms of global sport, the global sport movement and the Commonwealth movement, sport is still very much Eurocentric. And that has historical antecedents that is the subject of a next conversation. Next slide, please. Right. Whatever the questions or doubts may be, and each of you may have, the dinosaurs are seeking revenge. It is an undeniable fact that sport in the 21st century has transformed from a pastime and hobby of aristocrats and the rich to become a global force, a common language that is unquestioned. You see the interest, billions of eyeballs, millions watching sport, whether it is the Olympics, the NFL, Super Bowl, whether it is the Grand Slams, golf, football, cricket. Sport is a common language that anyone, regardless of nationality, can understand. The global impact of sport, be it globalization, be it the socio-economic and social, cultural transformation of sport has had a global impact, resonance, and relevance. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, countries need to have a sport diplomacy strategic plan that is supported by government to leverage sport, sport diplomacy, in strengthening national brand and international profile. Sport is a diplomatic asset that can be used for international outreach. And as we will all appreciate, power is a key concept in international relations. Hard power and soft power. In the art and science of modern diplomacy, sport can be used to establish representation, create a communication channel, and manage international relations by negotiation. The corporate world, the high-profile politicians, all ensure that they get their invites and go to all these big major events, and they sit down. A lot of deals are cut. You know, long time it used to be said that golf was where the major decisions are made, both in business and politics. Now, it is said, it is claimed that that happens at major global sporting events. Give me a slide. And if somebody can give me a quick time check, I want to make sure I don't overshoot the time because I want to touch on what we all can do now to make a powerful and positive difference in harnessing the power of sport and sport diplomacy. So modern sport and politics equal sport diplomacy have been connected for centuries. So we may not have paid attention or recognized that, but way back when, Reverend J.C. Weldon, director of Harrow School, once said a few years in Harrow School, the rest of that is back in the 19th century. He said, it is written in the history of the British Empire that England owes its sovereignty to sports. George Orwell's view was sport is war without weapon, while French writer and diplomat Jean Giraudoux believed that sport is peace. The iconic Nelson Mandela School of Thought positioned sport as a platform for international dialogue. Madiba said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire, to unite in a way that little else does. Mandela further said, sport can awaken hope where there was previously only despair. He said, and he reaffirmed, sport speaks to people a language they can understand. I repeat, sport is a diplomatic asset. Sport diplomacy as a strategy ought not to be ignored any longer, because sport is an untapped resource that can create generational change. I repeat, sport is an untapped resource that can create generational change. Next slide, please. The role of diplomacy in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda, diplomacy, social justice, and human rights. What practical steps can be done now? An action plan for building a stronger, safer, fairer world, i.e. the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Just some quick suggestions, which we could always expand on You'll have my email. Patricia and the team are doing a fantastic job. You can stay in contact. The people who presented have all been great and brilliant. And as I said, there's an opportunity for further dialogue. So as I just run through, what practical steps each of us, each of you can do now. Remember, sport is also big on volunteerism. In other words, grassroots. In other words, bringing it down to the community. So I've just in this slide, I'm not going to expand on it because I'm sure time is up. Build linkages, which is a tie into Goal 70. Strengthen communities, which is a tie into the SDG Goal 11. Use the power of sport. This is what we can do now. Use the power of sport to create a bond of trust and reciprocity, create leadership opportunities, and increase the participation of women and girls in sport. Use the power of sport to promote gender equality, disability inclusion, social cohesion, and healthy lifestyles. That is tied into the SDG goals 3, 5, and 10. Support efforts at a grassroots level to enhance sports' role as a cost-effective tool and flexible tool for development, sport for development and peace. Support good governance policies and systems that help build safe, fair, and accessible sport. That's tied into SDG goals 16 and 17. Create opportunities for sport entrepreneurs and furthering the development of the sport industry. It's tied into SDG goals 1, 8, and 9. And support global efforts to increase awareness of the contribution of sport to the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Also, the effectiveness of sport in terms of dealing with the environment and sustainability and the climate change crisis, because it is a fact that sport, especially major events, it has a big environmental footprint. Next slide, it should be the wrap-up slide. So thank you for your time and attention. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to Patricia, who has been a rock in terms of over the last couple of days. Josephine Lemon Kiki, who reached out to me. Thank you to all the ladies. Thank you to all of you who have taken time to listen. A reminder, sport matters. Sport is one of, Patricia, could you just give me one more minute to wrap up, please? Thank you. So you come on, it means that you want to run me off the stage. Sport matters. Sport is one of the most powerful forces in the world for good. Sport inspires and changes lives for better. Sport is transformation. The Sustainable Development Goals agenda is transformation of the world to a better world. Diplomacy on the hook can contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda. Each of us, each of you, you are important. Your contribution is important. Act now. The future is now. Today, not tomorrow. Act now. Let us take individual and personal responsibility to be the change you want to see. Thank you very much again. It's the end. Could you kindly put up the image of happy and joyful inclusion and diversity? Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that Yorker of a presentation, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yes, I would now like to invite my co-host, Josephine, to field your questions. And for those who did not catch my terminology just now, that was a cricket terminology.
Okay, Kamisha, can you just allow me to do a minute or less before the questions just keep coming so that I don't miss the sport? Okay, no. Just to say, Brian, thank you so much. That was really, really brilliant in terms of how you demonstrated sports diplomacy. We had that discussion on Monday as well. And it was quite, you know, from your perspective, it's quite really very traditional. I see it like, you know, getting it home and inclusive in terms of how we perceive sports diplomacy. And I'll take you on 4 things which you've mentioned, which I think is something everyone should take away. Sport matters, and I think that's great. Diplomatic assets, an untapped resource, and also sports creates generational change, or it will create generational change, and sport is transformational. And on this basis, I would say this is a fantastic work, and I think we can build on this going forward from here. So let me leave the questions to come in, but we really appreciate the time you spent, and we say more work to be done. And we are coming to Trinidad and Tobago for your information, so get ready. Thank you.
Yes. That's awesome. If I may quickly comment, I saw a comment coming there, one from Andrew Baptiste. Yes, it was very time. Didn't permit the link for me to do as expansive as I would like to be. As a matter of fact, Patricia and Josephine and the team will tell you that if you looked at the PowerPoint presentation and the script I sent in, I actually went off script sometimes. But those of you who have heard me present before know
Yes,
I'm
so this is
capable of doing
brilliant.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So let's leave it open. Tamisha, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
I agree, we can do a special sports diplomacy session, but I leave that to Patricia and her team at the International Center for Protocol and Diplomacy. There we go.
All right.
So if one of the things that come out of this, Patricia, and you should be encouraged, because as I told you, and I will say publicly, that your innovation, and you have innovated in terms of the tie-in between diplomacy, because these old traditionalists, mainly old white men in the old white boys club, don't look at it, because I said there's a traditional view with which they view. If you look at what is happening on the United Nations, except we wouldn't get into that, because I know people, you know, they want to have to deal with those realities. But I think that how you're trying to reposition and open a whole different conversation about diplomacy is very innovative, and you deserve enormous credit for it. And because you have invited sport diplomacy, so as you see from the comments, sport diplomacy is powerful in addressing racism, sexism, and all the isms. And this is a conversation we need to continue to have, because of the power of sport, as articulated by the iconic Nelson Mandela.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, thank you, Brian. That was really good. So we'll take things forward from here. All right. Tamisha, if we can just take 1 or 2 questions very quickly so that we can move on to Noella. Yeah. If you want to let the changes know to be known, so let's.
I have questions, please, if I may. So don't dilute my phone after with questions that you didn't want to ask. Ask your 1 or 2 questions, and then feel free after that to contact you, Patricia.
Okay, Tamisha, yeah.
Actually, one question here for you that Josephine will field to you. However, there will be a switch between our speakers. Our next speaker will be Neola. So after your questions, that is who we will be going into next. Okay? So Josephine, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Tamisha. Brian, thank you so much for that. Like you know, I have a passion and a love for the ethos of Olympic. So I'm delighted that you accepted the invitation to be here today. Question from Derek. Is there a tool developed to quantify the ROI, return on investment, of sports diplomacy? Jamaica would be a prime candidate for a leadership study.
So if I got a question right, you're asking about the return on investment.
Yes, that is asking if there's a tool developed to quantify return on investment of sports diplomacy.
Well, not that I'm aware of, because sport diplomacy is in its early stages. If you look at the literature, etc., in terms of academics and scholars, you know, there's a lot of back and forth. It's now evolving. Let me say this quickly, right? Diplomacy in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and sport diplomacy, as I was saying earlier on, credit to Patricia, presents a new set of ideas, values, value systems, and knowledge on the table. And it is important that we do not get put down that narrow road where every human intervention has a dollars and cents attached to it. Because what price do you pay for human development? For non-discrimination, for staying woke. Anyway, that will be my quick response to the question.
As I mentioned earlier in the week, I was involved with the Sydney Olympic Games and the London 2012 Olympic Games. And Brian, I think you mentioned to me years ago that you were at the name, and I think you recall that both careers came out under the International Olympic Committee flag. That was an amazing experience. My pores are rising now, 11 years on. Now, alas, nothing has really happened further with the two Korean countries, but there was so much hope, and they got a standing ovation. We have that example. We've got, Madiba, President Nelson Mandela. We've seen even from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago as well. And when Trinidad and Tobago got into the 2006 FIFA World Cup final stages, my side before Ned came to me and said, well, he took me on the phone and said, Auntie, do you know that Trinidad is in the World Cup in Germany? It captures the youth. Sport captures the youth and unite countries, unite communities. Yes, there's an electric side to it, as you've seen with England and the footballers. But is there anything more you think we can do and try to promote the positive side of sport diplomacy? Is there a call to action that we can have on this?
Let me just respond quickly, because I respect that there's a next speaker lined up. I saw a very interesting question, which we could always address later, Patricia, where Nelson is asking about the role of sport boycotts. I think that's an important question in the terms of sport diplomacy and diplomacy on the whole. But I just wanted to make this point in closing, and then come off stage left so that the next speaker can get on, and that the participants who wish to hear can, the next speaker, so he can hear. Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. The practice of sport had been agreed on, given the stamp of approval by the great United Nations. Sport is a human right. A human right. And that the overall mission of the Olympic movement and the IOC, International Olympic Committee, and all the NOC, regardless of sometimes they get it wrong, is to contribute through sport to a better world. And it is about putting Olympism, the philosophy of Olympism is about putting sport at the service of humanity. I close with that.